Welcome back. Welcome in. This is Country Roads Confidential at earsports.com, part of the Emergency Podcast Network. Chris Anderson, fresh cut. Things are happening so fast today that this is legitimately true. In the amount of time that I went for a run and went to the gym, thing I do daily, as you know, because this always seems to interrupt our workflow, the women's basketball coach of 21 years retired. 2 starting basketball players transferred. And not only that, but the basketball players transferred in such a manner that I was in the car on the way back to my house when you told me about Isaiah Cottrell going into the portal and said, "Can you do something? I'm about to go get a haircut." And I said, "No, I'm in my car." You said, "I got it. Don't worry." I got to my house, which is not far from the gym. It was after your haircut time. And I'm feverishly texting you saying, "Did you say anything about Bridges?" And by the time that you got out of the chair, Jalen Bridges had entered the transfer portal. That's a lot of news in a day. And here's the weird part. People do clamor for emergency podcasts. I don't know if Kobe Johnson is going to be on the team by the time that we publish this. I don't know if Seth Wilson is going to let me go get a coffee later with my wife. This is just a strange thing. It's the phenomenon in college sports in 2022. I wrote this today. It's driving fans bonkers. It's a problem that schools are somehow going to have to reconcile. And I don't know, one, if they know that, and 2, if they know what to do with that. We have a large tree with a lot of branches here. I don't know where to begin. And I don't want to begin. I'm going to let you go first, Chris Anderson. How do we begin to unpeel this?
Can I start by saying I'm wondering, did you have like a spidey sense this morning? Because for those that don't know, Mike and I are in different spots, and we do our own thing. Like, we kind of semi-orchestrate what's going up on the site. We kind of have our own little times when we put stories up, when we're doing regularly scheduled programming, if you will. But it's not like one of us is checking up on the other to make sure they're doing their work at any time, right? Like, I'm like, "Hey, do you have your stories?" Or you like, "Hey, are you writing this?" We don't usually do that. And then you sent me a message this morning being like, "Hey, I got this set for this time. Some news is coming in a little bit. I'm also going to have this story set for this other time." And you said, and then you said, "I'm going to the run. I'm going on a run, going to the gym. Are you around to handle it?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm around to handle it. I only have a haircut at 2:00. We'll be fine." It was like we knew. And I don't think we've had one of those morning texts with each other in a while. It was like you knew a few things were going to happen today. A little spidey sense going on.
Well, here's why. The basketball season, for all intents and purposes, ends Thursday. Guys get back to campus Friday. I think that they knew that these 2 guys were going, and it takes typically 2 days to get into the portal system and everything. The more we think about it now, the fact that they said no to the CBI, maybe we romanticize the fact that they maybe knew something about the NIT. They probably knew they weren't going to make the NIT either. So, yeah, fresh start, I guess. And here's the thing, like, if you made a case about them playing in the CBI, it was because Kobe Johnson, Seth Wilson, Isaiah Cottrell, Jalen Bridges, and maybe they knew. And I guess we can just get into these 2 here. Well, let me ask you this, because I had this discussion with Justin Jackson when he pinched it for you on the podcast. Cottrell is the one guy that I thought was a flight risk, in that I just think that he was the most poachable player. And what I mean by that is that's somebody who could get into a player's ear, or somebody who could get into the camp's ear. So if he's got people, if he's got handlers, whatever, you could talk to him and say, "Hey, you want to jack 23 footers with a really good point guard in another conference?" Like, I think he could do that. And if you had, think of it this way too, if you had an expansion draft and assets you could protect, he would be my number 1, because I just think that he's that much of a risk to go somewhere else if the right message was said to the right person. And here we are, not even a week from that conversation, and he's in the portal, and he is going to get a ton of attention, because you just do not see ability like that. Did he have all the ability this year? No, but let's not forget, like, devastating injury. His last season doesn't count, so he's got everything you need to go in and go somewhere else and play 3 full years. I just think that it's upward and onward for him, and I think that he can be picky about finding the right spot. I think he's going to get suitors, and again, if he's cast right, he's a very effective player. That one I think hurts just because it's hard to find players like him.
I like that we're I like that we're I don't want to say we're disagreeing, but I like that we're not going to agree, but we're not disagreeing. Because when you ask me about these two players right here, I think the bigger loss is Bridges. And we'll get into why and maybe why not for both of these guys. Uh, but with Cottrell, you kind of touched on it there. That the positives. How many times do you have a 6'10" guy who can shoot from three and is athletic? That is extremely rare. So and has 3 years of eligibility remaining. So hey, he's going to be recruited. This isn't one of those situations where he's going to transfer and end up at some D2 school or some very small Division I school and kind of just fade off into oblivion, as Mike Tyson once said. He's going to get recruited, but trying to find the silver lining from the West Virginia side of things, and what was the conversation all year long about the lineups, the combinations, how it works, who works well. Why does Huggins keep playing player X in these situations? It's not working. All the numbers say it's not working. Your boy, Evan Miyagawa, ratings for everybody on West Virginia's team. 10 players qualified, played enough to qualify for this. At the top, Gabe Osaboyan, 39.2. Taz Sherman, 29, Kobe, and so on. Everybody is positive, except for one player. The number 9 player on the team, Keedy Johnson, who was plus 5.7. That's number 9, second worst player on the team, plus 5.7. Isaiah Cottrell, in last, at negative 14.2. The difference between the 9th best player and the 10th best player on West Virginia's team, from Keedy Johnson to Isaiah Cottrell, according to their performance this season, is the equivalent of the difference between like West Virginia's 9th best player and their 4th best player, their 3rd, 4th best player. So it's their 3rd best. It's significant how poorly West Virginia performed when he was on the court this season, and we saw it with his minutes declining as the year went along, his role diminishing, really up until I felt like the last few games, and maybe I don't know if the numbers will bear this out. I feel like it with my own 2 eyes and my faulty, failing, older memory, that he kind of started gunning a little bit from deep as the year went on and played more of that stretch 4 that most everybody thinks he is, rather than that traditional 5 when he's not a traditional 5.
Fair enough. What was the game where he was like 4 of 13? Was it Kansas State on the road or TCU on the road?
Kansas State on the road, 5 of 14.
It's one of the most intriguing games of the year because he sat for like the final 8 minutes of that game in a close game, and I think it was because he was feeling it. He was Philip Seymour Hoffman, and along came Polly.
And that was because Gabe was suspended but not, and was at that game. Gabe was suspended but not, and Damone Kerrigan was mysteriously not allowed to play the entire first half, but no mention of that either. So, and yeah, you're right though. I think like that first half, it felt like the offense was centered around him. Like Huggins said, we are game planning for you to fire away, and he did.
Let me counter you. How dare you use Evan against me, Chris? 2-player lineup combinations. Again, it's not 2-on-2 basketball. I understand that. But when you look at some of their best 2-player combinations, if you're going by him, you're going by adjusted team efficiency margin, which means it's the difference between how many points you score per 100 less how many points you allow per 100. The best ones on the team, Kobe Johnson, Pauly Polycap, Taz Sherman, Kobe Johnson, Kerrigan, Seth Wilson. These are small sample sizes. Number 5 on the team with a larger sample size, 191 possessions on offense, 197 on defense. That's the 3rd most frequent one among a top performer is Gabe Osaboyan and Isaiah Cottrell. Cottrell is not playing the 5 in that situation. Osaboyan is. I just think that he has been miscast as a 5 and having to do things on defense and maybe also offense as a 5. In a lineup with Osaboyan or a 5, and he's the 4 and Jalen Bridges is the 3, that's how that's supposed to function. Bridges had to play a lot of 4 this year and wasn't particularly effective when he had to do that. That's the price of playing 3 guards. When you start Kedrian Johnson, Taz Sherman, Sean McNeil, and you want to have some firepower, I'm okay with putting Bridges at the 4, but now you're playing Cottrell at the 5, and that does come with some collateral damage. But when you look at situations, his numbers with Polycap are similar too. Not quite as emphatic because Polycap doesn't score as much, but neither does Osabuoyen really, but he could. But when you put Cottrell at the 4 and have an actual 5 or someone who does 5 stuff, which is not Cottrell's suit, he's a better player. And that's why I think if you send him somewhere now where he can pick and pop, I remember the start of that Texas game, a couple pick and rolls where he dived to the basket, caught one, scored, caught one, got fouled, faded, hit a 3, and they just didn't do a lot of pick and roll basketball this year because they didn't have a pick and roll point guard. If he ends up on a team that can pick and roll, and he either is the screener or he's the guy that catches the ball when they screen the screener and he's open for threes, like he's just a tricky guy. Is he a starter? Is he all conference? I don't know, but there's just some asset potential there that wasn't realized here. On Bridges though, that's a guy who's going to go somewhere now and is going to be, I would imagine, one of the, I don't know who's in there 3 weeks from now when the tournament's over, but Bridges is going to be a pretty coveted property.
Yes, he is. I think that was the guy that, again, if you're asking me about these two, I think I'd be a little more worried about losing him, partly because I felt like he could do anything. I feel like he has the ability and the athleticism to play on the wing, to maybe play that 4 in some looks, as you mentioned there, when you're really trying to get an offensive firepower going or trying to get some more pace going. He's a guy that can play the 4, or you could have him at a 3. I think that's his more traditional position, and even at 2 if you went really big. So I think he's got a lot of versatility. I think he can defend. I think he can shoot. I think he can dribble. Problem is, what was the other comparison that I made of him? Maybe it was 2 times ago on the podcast with you.
It's valid. It remains valid, yeah.
Because it was Emmett Matthews. Mm-hmm. He was a guy that I felt like could do anything, but oftentimes didn't do anything and would disappear for long stretches, entire games at times. And and we saw that again with him this year. I mean, he had a 0-point game in a close game at home against Texas. I think when he was really needed. He only played 14 minutes. I mean, he got benched quick. No points, 1 rebound. Over the course of from the Big 12 SEC Challenge on. So that is a month and a half of games. He was on the court for an average of 28 minutes. So it's not like he didn't have the opportunity to do anything. He was on the court for an average of 28 minutes in those games and scored 7 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, and shot 40% from the floor and 30% from 3. That's a subpar. That is this statistically, because me personally, I think he has the potential to be very, very good. Statistically, that is a subpar starter by a large margin in this conference.
What's the casting for him? I laid out my scenario for Cottrell. Bridges, I would maybe beg to differ with you a little bit. I'm not sure he's a great player off the bounce right now, or that he would get there. It's not been what he's done. He's been a catch and shoot guy. He was not a prolific scorer in high school either. Now, granted, he was a guy in high school, and everybody knew that, so he probably had unique attention to him on defense. But you figure maybe he would learn to run off the 3-point line and get to the basket in high school to use that in college. Never really happened. Not a great defender. Not a consistent rebounder. We remember the tales, and this is obviously, I would say, purposefully exaggerated, but the end of the 1920 season, he was evidently the best rebounder on the team. He just happened to not be eligible to play, right? But what struck me this year was that even when he wasn't shooting early on, he was a positive because he could do other things. Again, not a great defender, but he could fit in and do things, and he was rotating and one of the few veterans who was playing and knew what to do and could do it. He would block shots. He would get in passing lanes. He was good, and he wasn't scoring. He could rebound, and he wasn't scoring. If he wasn't scoring, he would get in the glass, shoot free throws, shoot 1-footers, whatever, and that faded. And I just wonder if at a time where a player thinks he should be blossoming, he kind of gets tired of the mundane stuff. We're at manufacturing points and serving a purpose beyond points. And that's a hard thing sometimes. It's a hard thing for players to realize that you are still valuable and also needed if and when you're not scoring points. I thought he had that kind of under his belt early in the season, and it went away. And it's just not a guy who had a ton of moves and who didn't post up very often or very effectively, didn't play with a lot of confidence, seemed extremely frustrated at the end of the season. I don't know what you put him in, how you cast him, what the right lineup situation, cast of characters around him is. What do you think?
I love the idea of him as, I mean, if we've caught a theme onto some of my pitches for what West Virginia should be doing, it's that I like the more fast-paced, spread it out kind of style with some of the guys who are on the team. I love the idea of him at the 4, but as you noted, it cannot be with Cottrell at the 5. That just doesn't work. And so I think you have to get it going because and you have to go with the big man. And the big man, I'm not sure they had it this year. You know, they had guys that could play the 5, but there were obviously deficiencies. No true 5, as much as they tried through the transfer portal, as much as they tried with Gabe and all the good things that Gabe does, all the good things that Kerrigan and Polycap were able to do. No true 5 that could play next to Bridges in that 4. Just somebody to just eat up rebounds, really. But because there's something else, we're doing an emergency podcast, so somebody will probably run the numbers behind me, but a quick glance and a quick thought that popped in my head, then a quick glance at the game logs. If he's not scoring and shooting, he's not doing anything. He he did at the beginning of the year, like you said, he could rebound, he could play defense, but statistically, like the games where he's also grabbing rebounds and the games where he's also getting steals and blocks, he's scoring. Or he's at least shooting. The Pitt game, 5 block shots, also scored 18 points. You go up and you look at the Oklahoma State game where he had a season high 22 points, 3 blocks, a steal, 5 rebounds. Even in the Kansas game, he had 12 points, which is a solid number. It's above his average, like 50% above his average. But he got 11 shots, so he was involved in the offense. He was shooting a lot. He had 11 rebounds, a season high. So every time that he gets involved in the offense, when he is shooting, when he is, I want to say scoring, but I think it's just having the ability to shoot. He is doing the other things as well. It's like it pumps life into him on the court, which is a positive and a negative. You shouldn't need to be able to shoot 12 times for you to give effort on defense or on the glass. Should be doing that anyway. But he is a guy. Again, that's why it kind of gives me this thought that he could be really good when he wants to assert himself for the entirety of the game.
It's the worst combination on the team, by the way, Cottrell and Bridges, as far as the lineup goes. Going back to Evan Miyakawa stuff, adjusted team efficiency, that goes on the quality opponent who's playing for the other team at that moment they're on the floor together. They played 558 offensive possessions, 554 defensive possessions. It's a lot. They were outscored by almost 11 points per 100 possessions. So you're figuring across 500 possessions, 55 points, right? That's a lot. I mean, that's a big deal. And then weighted chemistry. This is again very analytical stuff, but basically weighted chemistry is we're going to consider all the factors: who you're playing with, who you're playing against, the quality of your teammates, the quality of the opposition, pace, all that stuff. Their score is minus 149.5. The second leading, I guess, trailing combination is negative 77.9, so almost half. And it happened to be Jalen Bridges and Kedrian Johnson. So you're kind of getting a theme here. This is it a less of more? I think that's kind of what or a better off without them kind of a thing. I think that maybe what you're leaning toward, Chris, or at least like you can't assume that they're going to be better, but there is certainly a way to look at this and say these were negatives this year. Perhaps they're better off, which leads to this: who and how now? Because we were wondering if they were going to have between 1 and 3 scholarships, 3 at most, depending on the decisions that Sean McNeil and Kedrian Johnson make. Do they come back for their next year? Don't know. Now the minimum is 3 more scholarships, up to 5. You're looking at between 7 and 9 new players next year on a 13 scholarship limit. Not great, Chris.
No, not great, but not unheard of either. amazingly
Timely story.
well timed the story this morning. This is like that timeout story that I wrote, and then an hour later, comments about the timeouts from football season. But I talked about the Bob Huggins fixing it and went back and looked, and he said this will be the 5th time a Bob Huggins coach team has had a losing record. The first 2 were both his first year at a new school. So those don't even, and in first year at a new school, that was bad. So I don't even feel like we can count those for this kind of comparison. The other 2, obviously the 2012-2013 season at West Virginia and the 2018-2019 season at West Virginia. In both cases, was it 14 total, 15 total departures in the offseason from those teams? Most of those transfers, not graduation, transfers, guys leaving, and a lot of new talent coming in. And I think those are the 2 things that I try to take away, because that's how I started on this story was, hey, there's the 2 other times this has happened with Huggins at West Virginia. How did it get fixed? What's happening right now in this offseason? And one of the things, the main thing was just a complete and total roster overhaul, because a lot of guys out, a whole lot of guys out. Average, like I said, average of 7 or 8 in those 2 years. And then a whole lot of new guys in. And the contributors for the ensuing season or the 2 seasons later when the team was back in the NCAA tournament, back in the top 25, only like 1 or 2 were on the team when they were bad. So the people who helped lift the team back up were not bench guys that were on the roster. Were not guys who got better in their second or third year. They were not the Jalen Bridges or the Isaiah Cottrells. They were the new guys coming in. They were the Deuce McBrides. They were the Daxter Miles, Devin Williams, Elijah Macon. These are the guys that came in and made a difference in that offseason and into the new year and helped the bounce back. So these massive departures, not surprising at all. I wouldn't be surprised if, more happened. I mean, it's just the way it is right now, I feel like. But it's going to be some massive overhaul, and there's going to be some new guys coming in.
Bob Huggins or our representative out in Kansas.
Oh, I have an update on that, by the way.
Oh, well, they're out in Kansas for the National Junior College Tournament, and now they suddenly have a whole bunch of like draw 4 cards in their hand because they can do some things now that they couldn't. I don't know how many junior college guys you want, except I've said this, I maintain this. I do think it's an option because, one, the transfer portal has made the more mature, more immediate response guys, as opposed to waiting on high school recruits to wait a year or 2. Like, you're getting guys with some experience, some grit to them. You're not seeing a lot of junior college guys because of the popularity of the transfer portal. There are good players out there, and then the national tournament is going to be a showcase for them. You had a story about who they're looking at, who they have connections to, and there were some impressive players at positions I think they're going to go for. I had a conversation with someone last week. They were looking at a 1, 3, and a 5, which made sense. 3 was kind of a weird thing, but they didn't really have a 3 beyond Bridges last year, and he played a lot of 4. But definitely a point guard, now a wing and a center seem like obvious things they have to have. There were players out there too. Huggins is also going to be on television doing analysis with Frank Martin. I'm assuming, Chris, they'll have a conversation about Bryce Lindsey, who is, a 3-star combo guard in South Carolina's recruiting class, who has now opened up his commitment because Frank Martin is no longer going to be the coach. A pretty impressive list of offers there. 6'3", 180 scorer from Baltimore, Maryland. They could go a bunch of different avenues here too, because again, there are going to be players who always wait in this class to either sign, commit, or decommit because of a coaching change, and there's going to be many. There might be an option to get some high-level high school players as well. The point is that West Virginia's in the game right now. I'm sure they have a plan. I guess we'll begin with, where do you think this goes, and also what are your updates there?
So the first update, you mentioned it because I wasn't sure which way to go in my story originally that went up. Was that Monday morning or Tuesday morning? I think it was whichever day it was. I said I had multiple sources telling me things, and it was Huggins or an assistant coach at the National Junior College Championships in Hutchinson, Kansas. Change that or to and also it will continue. Both Huggins and an assistant coach were at the NJCAA tournament to begin the week, the first couple round games. Obviously Huggins is going to be leaving for the CBS thing. I believe he has a stop on the way. I may have an update on that in the morning as well. But an assistant coach will be at the NJCAA tournament continuing moving forward. So first off, obviously this is an avenue they want to take. If they are going to send their head coach and an assistant coach, maybe a second assistant coach, and stay there for multiple days, which they already have and will continue to do, I'm told, this is an option they want, they like, and they're going to pursue it.
This is getting the left-hander up in the bullpen and then the right-hander right after him, because you're going to make some changes and you're going to have one guy face one batter and one guy three batters now, but you need arms ready and you're going to go in and you're going to close this thing. So they're having all hands literally on deck here, huh?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it sounds like. I think when we reported this, and I mentioned in the story, so I don't know why there was still confusion, but this tournament is different than the NCAA tournament
right.
for obvious reasons, but also because it's all held in one place. It is more like a national AAU tournament or a Nike EYBL league type tournament, where games and all teams, all games, they're all played in one place. So you can go as a college coach or an assistant coach, scout, whatever, and sit in one place for a week and see dozens of games and see hundreds of athletes. See, probably, obviously not going to recruit all those guys, but you can see a lot of people that you are interested in and that you could use in one spot. So it is a very efficient use of your time, especially right now, and especially because, and this is a two-pronged point here. One, because you're going to hear a lot of people say, oh, look, this is only happening to West Virginia again. Look, they're losing 2 starters. It's only happening in West Virginia. It's only happening in West Virginia right now because everyone else's season is still going on.
Mm-hmm.
West Virginia is one of the very handful of teams that isn't playing in some postseason tournament. So once those teams season in, once some team loses in the first round of NIT, they're going to lose a starter or two to the transfer portal. Once some team loses in the Sweet 16, they're going to lose a starter or two to the transfer portal. So, point there, it's going to happen to others as well. I don't want to do this whole it's only happening in West Virginia thing. It's not good that it's happening in West Virginia. I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying it's going to continue to happen, and other teams are going to lose players moving forward. Second point of this, why would you not go to this junior college option when the actual transfers aren't even available yet, when they're not even in the portal yet? You can't even talk to them yet. You can't see them yet. So you go see the junior college players now, and then in a week or two, when all these other teams' seasons come to an end and their players enter the transfer portal, then you turn your focus to those guys.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm making my pitch for recruiting coordinator. How's it going?
Which leads me to this here too. Listen, they're going to have to do something with their staffing, I believe. I don't know if all 3 will come back. I just wonder how you run it back. If you're talking about changing things and shaking things up, then I don't think you shake the snow globe and tell certain snowflakes to stay put. I think that when you do stuff like this, there's going to be a lot of things that move around. So definitely be keeping an eye on that. So we'll keep an eye on who's on the road, who's not, in addition to who they're looking at and who's not. But right now, by all indications, all the assistant coaches are working and are out doing things. So perhaps that they haven't rounded that corner yet. There's a very obvious Frank Martin, Bob Huggins thing happening right now too. This is going to be, I would say, highly entertaining television. It could be really good exposure for Bob Huggins to be, out on television, and he's got a personality. He's going to be funny. He's going to have insight and things like that. If he chooses to unleash that side of him, and perhaps that opens some people up and say, that guy looks like a fun guy to play with, because the truth is that it doesn't look like a fun situation right now. And that probably leads me to this too. If you're a guy like Cottrell and a guy like Bridges, you need a point guard to get you the ball. You really can't do a whole lot of things on your own authentically, organically. It'd be great if you had a one who could facilitate you. Bridges has kind of a prolonged set shot. Cottrell, he's got to get that ball above his head. That takes time too. So again, guys who have to catch it in a good spot and shoot it. And you saw that was not a thing that even really good shooters like Sherman and McNeil could do this year. Quite possibly those guys looked in the future and said, I'm not going to have a point guard who I know or trust or who has experience or talent getting me the ball next year. And I know we want to talk about the way they play and what they did not or could not do this season, but it is sometimes about who's around you and who can get you the ball. And if you're staring into that crystal ball, that magic 8 ball, whatever, and you say, someone here going to get me the ball, if you don't know, You don't know. And the point of their mission now is they can go someplace and they could do search filters, for example, and just say, all right, who's got a point guard coming back? Who's got an all-conference or a potential all-conference point guard? Where can I catch balls 20 feet from the basket and shoot open threes, or catch it, nab a guy who's closing out at me, and I step into a 12-footer? Where can I just do the things that are best for me? It's a lot easier for them when they're on this foot forward in the portal, and rather than waiting and hoping for something to happen here too. So I think it's
Mike,
easy to, yeah.
I'm sorry. I cannot believe your unbelievable timing.
Oh God.
Just okay. I really just now, literally 31 seconds ago, according to my tweet deck. Kedrian Johnson,
No.
I'm back, baby. Unfinished
Oh.
business.
Okay.
West Virginia's got a
Virginia will
point
have.
guard. What are you talking about, man?
Do they? Because they're out there looking for a one for sure.
Yeah.
That might be their priority. But hey, listen. We have an answer there. There's one less question mark.
Yeah, I'm not cracking jokes on Kedrian Johnson. We have talked about it before. There are very few players, nobody on this team that was a perfect player. He is a flawed player, but he does do some things very well. And again, we keep referencing these numbers, going back to the Evan Miyakawa numbers, and he was good. Statistically, he was. Was he top 2 or 3? No, but he was productive, especially. And I think he got better. I felt like he got better as the year went along. And so I would say this is good news for West Virginia.
Yeah, again, that's a really good defender for a team that did not play good defense. And when his defense dipped is when he just couldn't move anymore. His hips and legs were not great at the end of the season. So, hey, but listen, is that their one next year? Maybe. Is that the one that solves the problems, that pulls Cottrell and Bridges out of the portal? I don't know about that. And I have a hard time believing that they coordinate this news this way. Goodbye, I'm back. I don't think it goes that way. So I think these things are sometimes explained a lot easier than perhaps the reaction, which is, well, forget you. If you don't want to be with us, you're now against us. We'll see. I got a feeling you'll see one of these two guys on the other end of the floor sometime soon. How about that?
I know what that's about.
I don't want to name it, but like there's a connection out there somewhere that I don't think it's a secret. But I wouldn't be surprised if one of these two is an opponent next year. We'll see.
That'll be a fun game.
By the way, both highly recruited players too. So it would not be a surprise if they had a lot of people that went after him, both Cottrell and Bridges. So sure, that could happen too. The other bit of news, Chris, for the first time in a long, long time, a new women's basketball coach. This is something. It was very strange. They accepted a WNIT invitation with a 500 record on Sunday. On Monday, the athletic director comes out and says, well, actually, no. And they say, oh, injuries and transfers, that didn't happen overnight. They didn't just discover a bunch of transfers and injuries afterwards. And the wheels were in motion. We kind of suspected that there would be a change. We just didn't know how it was going to happen. Resignation, retirement, termination. I don't know. Mike Carey, not a secret. He'd been talking about retiring for, I don't know how serious the conversation ever is when it starts, but it wasn't a new thing. I don't really even cover women's basketball too often. I don't know him all too well because I don't cover it that often, but I know him. He would say hi to me if I saw him, things like that. I didn't have any intel there, but that's how I knew still enough that people had talked about him possibly retiring. It wasn't a secret. And it turns out he does retire, but 1 year left in his contract. Some strange things have happened in addition to the WNIT thing, but I just think about where it was when he was hired and where it is now. A heck of a job, a pretty great legacy for him. Turnover on his staff, turnover on his roster, but really got a lot out of a program that did not have a whole lot of, and didn't get a ton of luxuries and an influx of this or that too. It got harder for him in the Big 12, but he won a Big 12 tournament. He got a number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. He had a 30-win season. It's done an awful lot here for a long time.
I was going to say, the 3 year or 4 years before he arrived, the team won 33 games total in 4 years. And he had one losing season the entire time that he was at West Virginia. And he has been here this entire century. Mm-hmm. Or no, well, 2001. And had one losing season 15 years ago, 16 years ago. That's something, that he can be proud of, should be proud of. Team obviously did good things. A couple rough years here lately. This year, as you mentioned, closer to 500. Couple NIT bids instead of NCAA bids, but still a solid run for a very long time. Really turning the program around from just some really bad years there in the 1990s and right at the turn of the century.
I sent you a DM
Okay.
on what date was this?
I thought you meant you just sent one just now. Whenever you send me a DM while we're podcasting, that means something went wrong.
February 20.
Mm-hmm.
Credible intel. This would be Mike Carey's last year.
Yep.
It was not a surprise. And it's not a great thing either. I'm very interested in the direction that they'll go here. I know they say national search. I think they've got a list here. And what do you do here? Because there are some familial or familiar names. You could get the coach of Boston College, who's been here as on the bench before. You can get the women's coach at Glenville. Went pretty good the last time they got a coach out of the WVIAC and came to the WVU women's basketball. That would be Mike Carey. I do think that they have some ideas about going out there and saying, this is a program that's made a lot of tournaments, has a great practice facility, plays in a 14,000 seat gym. It's in a Power 5 conference. You're going to get home games against Texas Tech, Texas, Baylor every year. There's a lot of Iowa State, I should mention too, a great program every season. They need to have a big hire because it's not what they walked into before. I don't mean this in a way to denigrate Mike Carey's situation, but that was like Rutgers and UConn, two powers. Don't get me wrong, but you might get a Villanova in there every so often. You might get a Louisville. When they came in, they were a good program, but you didn't have a lineup like you have in the Big 12 here. But like, you need to compete, and I think they're going to go out and they're going to really try to spend on this and go for it. Carey made pretty good money, I think in excess of $700,000 a year. Will they spend all that on one person? I don't know. I'd also say that Mike Carey's last contract, do you know when he signed it, Chris? Think about all he's done, like 31 seasons, won the Big 12 tournament, number 2 seed in the tournament, made the NCAAs. April of 2016. He won the Big 12 tournament the next year, and just did not have his contract changed. His amendments came in the following year for performance incentives, but a long contract that was never addressed or amended, and he goes out now. So they might have to be a little bit more forthcoming about what their plans are for regularly updating the women's team. But I don't know. There's a lot to like there. I think it's going to be an interesting job that's going to get a lot of people from maybe a head coaching position, but also high level assistants too. Will be interesting to see what they do. They've had a pretty good eye for hires. You think about Stratford as one, which is an easy one from Division II. You think about the volleyball coach, Sunahara, from Cincinnati. He's worked out really well. Tim Flynn looked like he was a regional hire that made a lot of sense. Hasn't clicked for him, but it's a hard job too. But they seem to win the press conference sometimes, and they've had some good hires too in smaller capacities. Even baseball is obviously not Shane Lyons, but he's kept him here. That's good. So their small sports success has been good, and this will be an important one. I'm very, very interested to see what they do and what avenue they choose to take for a replacement.
Yeah, I feel like these kind of hires, the hires that are not for football and men's basketball, the two major revenue sports. Once you get outside of that, I think those might end up being more difficult than some of the football and basketball hires, just because so much attention is paid to those two that you gotta, like, a lot of people have a pretty good idea of who the good coaches are, who are the up and coming coaches. But you talked about when West Virginia hired Neil Brown, and you talked about Shane Lyons having a list. He always has a list on hand for those kind of things. I imagine it is a lot more difficult to have a list for some of these other sports, some of the non-revenue sports, if you will. And so you really have to be good at your job to make those good hires. And so far, West Virginia's been that.
Should be fun. Are you going to do the hot board, Chris?
I'm going to leave that to you. That's your realm.
How nice.
I don't want to encroach on your territory.
I'll be in the gym. Can't do it. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, hopefully nothing else happens. We joked that something might happen by the time we publish this. It did. Kedrian Johnson, welcome back. He'd be a great 2-guard next season.
Yeah.
Add some weight, rehab that hip, trust yourself going to the basket, finish around the rim. That'd be great. Really high scorer in junior college. He was hard to stop off the bounce. It's hard to play point guard when you're not a point guard, but served amicably this year. Amicably? Was he nice? No. He served ably this season, but again,
there you go.
maybe a little miscast, and if you get the right guys and the right clothes, they look a lot better on the court, and that might be as much of a chore or a goal for the offseason as exists right now. But I guess we'll keep our eyes open and our DMs and our PMs also open, because that's where a lot of stuff seems to happen right now. As always, things always happen at night, Chris. People get home from work, they have some brown liquid, they all of a sudden feel like they can talk and answer questions. So who knows? Who knows? But it's only early afternoon right here. I'm sure more will happen before too long, huh?
I can't believe soda does that to people.
Yeah. Diet Dr. Pepper, right?
Yep.
Well, go crack one open, Chris. I think you've earned it. Busy day for you. Until then, I'm Mike Casaza.
And I'm Chris Anderson.
Talk to you next time.